What's up, wrestling fans? It's time for another edition of The Voice of Wrestling right here on Fight TV. I'm your host, Chris Cash, alongside Nick Paglino, as always. Got a big show planned. In fact, got Kevin Kelly coming back on the show for Plan B. Some hot topics later on. Nick, before we get going, though, I wanna kind of be honest with everybody and let people know kind of what's going on in my world as we record the show. So I play pool, right? Like, I'm in a pool league on Wednesdays. Was in one on Tuesday. I do tournaments once or twice a week, and this is the biggest event right now as we speak in England. Actually, the biggest pool tournament of the year basically is going on right now. It's called the Moscone Cup, right? And it just started today. It's like a 3-day event. Europe plays USA. Best, 5-6 players of each will go and play each other in a matter, and it's like first one that gets to 11 points wins, right? And so on my phone, I don't know if you could see it, but on my phone, I'm like watching the live feed as we do the show, so I can kind of keep up with what's going on. Because, by the way, and for people that don't know, like, England has like kicked our ass for many, many, many years. We really suck in this thing, and we're already down 2-0. But the guy that's playing right now,
when you play pool, everyone's terrible at pool. You go to a bar, you play pool, and you're terrible at it.
Unless you
the only time you ever meet someone good, there's always that like lone guy who's hanging out in the corner, and he writes his name on the thing, and it's like always some weird, it's like Leopold or Randy, or Lance, and it's like, okay, where's Lance, and he's like, it's me, and he's like a short dude, and he's wearing like cargo pants with like a lot of pockets, and then he kills everyone, and then
just
he
runs the table
to be his partner in the next game, and it's like, no, get away from me. I don't want to be your partner in the
Leopold.
game. I don't know who you are, and it's like, you're wearing weird cargo pants, even his cargo pants are like, hey, man, listen, buddy, I'll hold all your things. You just go worry about making friends.
Right.
That's the guy who's always really great at pool. So I can totally believe that England is kicking our asses at that, because I've never met anybody good at it.
Well, we are struggling over the years, but we'll see how it obviously goes.
We're growing.
But
a couple of key trades if LeBron James ever decides to take his talents over. What's the team? Where are they based out
they're
of?
They're kind of all over. Most of these guys go around the U.S. competing against one another, and then they play this big tournament, a couple of tournaments that they'll go do together. But I'm a big pool fan. I enjoy it.
Just make sure you keep me up to date.
I will. I know. I will text you updates as we go. So anyway, I'll be occupied with that, but in the meantime, we'll try to make it through this week's main event. It's the main event here on The Voice of Wrestling. Chris Cash, Nick Paglino, and Nick. This week, there's not a ton of things to talk about that we're not going to talk about in the Hot Topics, or of course with Kevin Kelly, and so we wanted to kind of talk a little bit about one of my favorite guys, and I'm always curious and always love talking about Dolph Ziggler, and of course Drew McIntyre. It seems like this week on Raw, they're going to be turning, maybe they're already, it kind of seemed like they pretty much did it, turned Dolph Ziggler babyface. He kind of got the cheap win because of Finn Balor's involvement in the match, and but I'm very aware at this point, Nick, unfortunately, that this has less to do about some form of babyface turn and push for Dolph Ziggler, as it obviously does Drew McIntyre and his future, and then of course his feud with Finn Balor. And I'm curious that we can kind of open the floor. We'll talk a little bit about Dolph Ziggler, but I'm curious, Nick, with all the injuries and everything, it seems like Drew McIntyre, he's been in line for a push at some point. Clearly, and I think it's getting kind of rushed to the top of the priority list because they need some pretty good heels on the show. They need good baby faces too, so let's not kid ourselves. But Nick, first and foremost, what do you think of Drew McIntyre and specifically this whether it's a mini feud or maybe it'll have some substance to it, but the feud with him and Finn Balor, what do you make of it so far?
Yeah, I think Drew McIntyre right now is sort of a beacon of shining light on Raw. I gotta be transparent here and saying that, Raw again, sort of 2 weeks in a row right now where I just felt like this was a stale episode of the show, and I was reading a lot of reaction online, and people are constantly bringing up, what a better show SmackDown is. And again, I always like to say it's by default because Raw is a 3-hour show. And when you really break it down, there is so much filler on the show. Bobby Roode and Drake Maverick and the AOP and the Alexa Bliss segment and with Bayley and Sasha Banks. God. It just feels like such horrible filler. The Lucha House Party and whatever the hell they're doing with the Revival and nobody knows the rules of the match. It's just such filler content that when you see Drew McIntyre, he is a beacon of shining light on the show. And, everything that's being said about him in the Drew McIntyre appreciation night that we saw on Raw this week, and then by the fans alike online, it's right on the money. This guy has everything it takes. And, Chris, there's probably going to be a lot of there, and there were, I already saw online, and I'll be anxious to hear your reaction to it. A plethora of reactions to Dolph Ziggler. Now maybe he's a baby face. We're seeing all of these flip-flops with talents lately, with heel turns, baby faces. We just talked about this on the show, when we played tag in, tag out on all of the recent baby face turns and heel turns. But in this case, I really feel like the victim in everything that we saw on Raw this week is not Dolph Ziggler. It's Finn Balor. Because Finn Balor sort of came off as the afterthought somewhat. I mean, he had a good showing on Raw, without a doubt. It was even brought up that he had a great night on Raw, which he did. But to me, the excitement, or at least the way WWE has been building this, the excitement for me is the Drew McIntyre Dolph Ziggler match. And them potentially getting back to that feud,
right?
That's far more interesting to me than maybe what's going to happen with Finn Balor. And that's maybe just because I know WWE sort of views, or I believe WWE views Finn Balor as one of those glass ceiling type talents where, they're going to dangle the carrot there for you with Finn Balor, but they're just never really going to let him grab it. And I don't see him winning this match at TLC. And if he doesn't win the match, or even if he does, it probably will be via DQ or something along those lines because Dolph Ziggler gets himself involved. So I don't know how you felt, but I certainly, for any fan out there who feels like, Dolph Ziggler is going to get left behind in this Drew McIntyre Finn Balor feud, I don't think that's the case at all. I think Dolph Ziggler is always going to be that guy that is a trusted hand in WWE. He's always going to be there. He may not be at the top. He may not always be involved in a main event picture like you'd like to see him, but he's always going to be there of some relative importance on the show. It's Finn Balor that I'm a bit more concerned with in this feud with Drew McIntyre.
I would tend to agree with you. But if knowing WWE, at least especially recently, as it relates to Finn Balor, and then long term as it relates to Dolph, I kind of feel like it'd be hard to pick any clear-cut, front runner as far as the two of them. I mean, it could ultimately be detrimental for both. I think Drew McIntyre is going to be kind of the focal point for WWE going forward, regardless of what happens to Finn Balor and Dolph Ziggler. But it's hard for me, with so many years under our belt, of seeing Dolph Ziggler be what you're saying. I mean, he is that consistent guy that you can always have come off as relevant, even though in the grand scheme of things, it's been quite a while since he's been relevant. I think over time, Dolph Ziggler will will get the appreciation and respect that he deserves for what he does for the company night in and night out. But right now, he kind of always gets lost in the shuffle long term. Now, what he's been doing with Drew McIntyre has been great for quite some time. So I'm very thrilled since they came over to Raw from SmackDown. These guys have really made a mark, and they've done a lot of good things. And ultimately, Dolph Ziggler, who's probably okay with this, the fact that this is his role now, is probably okay putting over Drew McIntyre, who's truly more of the future as far as a main event player than Dolph Ziggler will most likely be, even though I still think he could be a lot bigger deal than what they make him out to be.
Very true, but let's also remember he won that match on Raw this week.
Well, Drew
McIntyre his first loss,
but that was
since
more
returning to WWE. So I think that is going to play into this storyline, and I think that's going to give Dolph Ziggler somewhat of an argument that I belong involved in this, and I think that's something important to remember. I agree, especially in light of the fact that it's not Dolph Ziggler that Drew McIntyre is facing at TLC. It's Finn Balor.
No, I agree with that. Other than I think that was still more about Finn Balor than it was Dolph. I mean, I even saw that coming. As soon as Finn Balor came out, I'm thinking this opens it up for Dolph to get a win, but does it really mean anything in the long run? No, because it's ultimately about Finn Balor and Drew McIntyre, and I think that was kind of, But I will admit this. They could have easily handed Dolph that loss and still kept Drew McIntyre completely strong even with it. But that would it would kind of diminish Finn Balor a little bit if he's out there and can't even help Dolph Ziggler win in that instance. That doesn't look good on him.
I think it was done really well.
Yeah, I agree.
Everything that we saw with Dolph coming out and interrupting the Drew McIntyre appreciation night, and then what we saw obviously in that singles match, I thought it was handled really well. I think everyone came out of that segment.
Yeah,
Drew McIntyre, Dolph Ziggler, Finn Balor, all three of those guys came out of Raw this week looking really good. So, I hesitate to, maybe I am kind of backtracking a little bit here. I don't want to make it sound like there is some kind of, terrible punishment coming to one of these three guys, because it is really great to see them working with Finn Balor at that level, utilizing him up against a guy like a Drew McIntyre, and Dolph Ziggler being thrown around in the mix. It was definitely a highlight of Raw this week for me.
And I agree with you. I think I'm a huge Drew McIntyre fan at this point. I love Dolph Ziggler, and the jury's out for me as far as Finn Balor, just because I think creatively they haven't given him enough to show me. They've really gone back and forth. The demon character was a part of it at one point. They've really, completely gone away with that, or gone away from it. And I think that you can kind of tell maybe they're trying to kind of make him a little more serious now, not so much that happy-go-lucky, smiles always kid that just isn't as cool as maybe he needs to be. He's a likable guy, and his in-ring work just makes him likable that much more. But from a character standpoint, I feel like that's kind of the disconnect. Maybe not so much from the fans' point of view, but from management. I feel like they don't look at Finn Balor as a true star. They just don't think that he is. They realize that he's likable, but Nick, they don't look at him as an A-list guy.
He has what I like to call smiling syndrome,
right?
Which is what I think WWE inflicts on baby faces that they don't know what to do with. They have them come out and smile like this. This is what Apollo Crews did forever, because they don't know what else to do with it. As far as I know, Finn Balor, if you were to ask, what is Finn Balor? He's a friendly guy that smiles a lot. That's really all you know about him.
Right.
So I agree with you. And that usually is a symptom of WWE not knowing what to do with a talent, or really not regarding that talent as top tier. Nevertheless, I do believe Finn Balor has that potential. We've seen it. I mean, this guy desperately needs to be a heel. I would love to see a heel turn from him. You got all these turns going on. I would love to see Finn Balor go heel, because we all know, anyone that's familiar with his work, even in NXT, even before coming to NXT and before coming to WWE, the guy certainly has it in him to be a genuine badass. But before we get off of the main event, because I think this kind of segues or dovetails in the same conversation that we're having right now with guys like Finn Balor and Drew McIntyre and Dolph Ziggler. You got to mention the fourth guy in this puzzle, and that's Baron Corbin. And it makes me wonder, because I actually wanted to bring this up when we were doing Tag In, Tag Out not too long ago, but we ran out of time. Chris, is it time for the general manager role on Raw to be scrapped? Or is this just me poorly reacting to Baron Corbin? Because I am getting so tired of what I'm seeing out of him week in, week out. And all of this stuff now with him. I mean, he's on your screen just forever. He's changing the rules of the matches mid-match. And it's just this... It's this storyline I feel like we've seen so many times. And I'm wondering, Chris, is it Corbin or is it this same old storyline that I'm getting tired of?
I would say the latter, because I actually think Baron Corbin has done a pretty good job, all in all. Like I think the authority, of course, it's easy to kind of liken it back to Stone Cold and Vince McMahon, and that's never going to be duplicated. But the authority figure is a staple in pro wrestling and storytelling and character building. Right. I mean, you always, at that point, even when you're not necessarily doing a great job building heel superstars, you at least always have somebody that can kind of circulate through all of your baby faces to make their lives more difficult. And it makes it a lot easier for storytelling across the board when you have a strong heel character at the top that's kind of running things. Now, clearly, WWE goes crazy with these things, and there's normally too many. Now we've got, of course, Alexa, which I understand for the women, because they really are trying to kind of separate the women from the men in a lot of ways, but also put them on equal footing at the same time. So giving them their own heel authority figure somewhat kind of makes sense. If they stick with it with Alexa, now that she's kind of been cleared to wrestle again. We'll see if that maintains. But I think that it's good for, and I think Alexa is always money as long as you keep her out of stupid, ridiculous segments like they've done with Bayley and it's awful. Like,
what a horrible segment. I mean, come on, it's like, and how about the guy that asked the question, the first guy? It's like, you got all these fans sitting there at ringside. Then all of a sudden you've got this like 6'5" ripped man who's asking Bayley and Sasha Banks like who their dream opponents are. I mean, am I really supposed to believe that's a fan who bought a ticket and is sitting there all by himself? This giant man who obviously looks like a professional wrestler.
It was bad.
Come on.
It was bad.
It's like they're not even trying.
It was bad.
And it makes the segment ridiculous. But you're right. And honestly, I was thinking about this a lot. It's been so long since we haven't seen an authority figure in professional wrestling that to me, it wouldn't even make sense from a standpoint of, well, if you don't have the GM or the commissioner, who's running the show?
Sure.
How do we know when matches are taking place?
Right.
Who wrestles who?
Look, I mean,
how do you pick a number one contender? So logistically, I feel like you need to have that role, but I think they're just overdoing it right now with Baron Corbin.
No, I agree.
It's way too much. You don't get this on SmackDown. You don't get this oversaturation of Paige and Shane McMahon.
No, right.
So I don't understand why you're getting such an oversaturation of Baron Corbin.
I think that also is a very big, kind of testament to the other complaints we've had for so long, Nick, as far as just how bad Raw is in general. I feel like they kind of have to have him out there more when the middle of the road storylines and feuds are struggling as much as they are. I mean, when you look up and down that roster, there's only a handful of guys, only a couple of really, decent feuds that fans are even invested in or care about. Keeping him out there at least, is better filler than some of the shit they've been writing. But I agree with you. I definitely think, look, if they give him more authority, and truly put him in a cemented role. If that's what they decide to do with Corbin, I'd be okay with that. Personally, I think he's better for the position because than Kurt Angle or someone along those lines, just because I feel like a heel authority figure is still the route to go. But as it relates, again, to his role and Drew McIntyre and stuff, Drew McIntyre, Dolph Ziggler, Finn Balor, it's a wait-and-see game for me when it comes to Dolph specifically and Finn Balor. I think Drew McIntyre is well on his way. I don't think WWE management's going to allow for him to fail, at least in the short term. He's going to be put in a spotlight position, and he deserves it. I think he is true. Like you mentioned, kind of a breath of fresh air on bad versions of Monday Night Raw right now. And I think Dolph Ziggler and Finn Balor will see what they do with them because, we kind of know what we get up to this point with both, and hopefully WWE will surprise us by maybe finally jumping on the Finn Balor bandwagon, at least, if nothing else. But we will keep you up to date, and we'll keep discussing that as it's relevant. That's the main event here on The Voice of Wrestling. Exciting, though, because Kevin Kelly, everybody's favorite, mine occasionally, very rarely is he my favorite. He's up next here on The Voice of Wrestling. We will be right back. And welcome back to The Voice of Wrestling. Chris Cash, Nick Paglino, and we're joined by Kevin Kelly. And like always, I have no clue what we're going to talk about today. So, Nick, why did you have Kevin scheduled for VOW this week?
Just to really brighten up your holiday spirit. I know you were saying earlier that, you've been listening to the same Reba McIntyre Christmas song over and over again since, November. So I thought I would, bring you some holiday cheer and bring in Kevin Kelly.
That's not the way to do it. Can I leave the segment now and just go listen to Reba?
This has been Kevin and I's plan for a year and a half. And only when Reba McIntyre got involved has it come to full fruition. Kevin, we've gotten rid of him.
Hey, I've never been so thankful for Reba McIntyre in my entire life as I am right now.
Neither have I.
Kevin Kelly joins us on the show with Plan B, has his own segment here, which I still try to get rid of, but the fans keep asking for him. Kevin, I guess you're not in Japan this week. This is the first time you actually are in the comfort of your own home. I don't really know why that's relevant, but I thought I would throw that out there. Kevin, what do you got going on lately, man? Oh, there we go. Okay.
I'm getting ready to head back to Japan tomorrow, and I'll be there for a couple of weeks through the last shows of the calendar year for New Japan Pro Wrestling. And then I come back, a couple of weeks off, and then go back for Wrestle Kingdom, which is right around the corner, January 4th. So we've got I'm not sure when this is airing, but Finals of World Tag League coming up on the 9th. And then the last two shows at Corkin on the 14th and 15th, or 13th and 14th, and then boogie on out of there. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, really jam-packed month, obviously, with Wrestle Kingdom coming up, and then, of course, New Year Dash. But even bigger news that kind of broke within the past week or so, and give the listeners a little more detail into Kevin Kelly joining New Japan Pro Wrestling on Access TV. How did that all come about, and when can fans look forward to that?
Well, it'll start with same day coverage of Wrestle Kingdom. So if you live in the US and you're not a New Japan World subscriber, you can see Wrestle Kingdom live and for free if you have Access TV. It'll air that night. And that's part of the reasoning. It used to be when the shows aired several years ago that there was a long delay. It was 3 months plus, before you got new episodes.
Right, well, right. And then it was broken down into actual individual episodes, right?
Yes. And it still will be after Wrestle Kingdom, but it is going to be they're going to take the feed from New Japan World in order to be able to turn the shows around quicker. So since I was the goof who signed up for this crazy detail of flying back and forth from the US to Japan, I'm the one that gets to be on Access TV, and Jim Ross will be there for unless something changes with him. He and I we wanted to have him there for Wrestle Kingdom. It couldn't work out. But we want to have him back in the summer months for some of the big events then. So hopefully that will all work out. But it'll be a lot of fun.
So can we say, like, can we break on the Voice of Wrestling? Because I heard that this is true, that there's some beef now between you and Jim Ross. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, he's tweeted a couple of things. They might have been cryptic, but I'm sure they were pointed at you. So there's some major beef now between you and JR.
Why are you the audio version of clickbait? I don't understand it. It's you and your Reba McIntyre records. That's all you need, Chris. No,
Chris bait. Yeah,
it's
There's
ridiculous. Nothing at all. There's nothing at all. In fact, if you did any research at all, you would have known that JR in his podcast just last week that he was happy for me and Don, and it was all systems go, and he's got good stuff coming up over the next few months, and that was it.
But realistically, though,
seemed to get pretty defensive there, Kevin. Pretty defensive.
All right. But really, so that we're very clear to the people that are watching and listening, Jim Ross, I think as far as we had known, he was either finishing up with New Japan, and we didn't know anything really regarding his future. So he is sort of going to be hanging around for some more events coming up in 2019. We haven't seen the last of Jim Ross in New Japan.
That's certainly our plan. If JR makes other plans that would preclude him from being available, then that might change. But we can't say in full certainty yet, hey, this is when JR is going to be back. But I do know that we want him back. We have target dates in mind, and if anybody knows anything about the New Japan calendar, you can sort of like figure out which are the big events in the summer months. So that would be an ideal time to have him back if it all works out. And I think it's going to be completely up to Jim if he wants to do it. He wanted to come back for Wrestle Kingdom, but his WWE contract, precluded him, I guess, from being able to do it. I'm not sure of all the
right
ins and outs of that, but anyway, yeah. So that would be wonderful if he did.
So this concept of same day airing, how did this kind of?
It's going to be me and Don Callis and Rocky. It's going to be me and Don Callis and Rocky Romero, and a cavalcade of stars, I'm sure, throughout the year, where you get to hear their voice and on both New Japan World and on Access.
And for Access, this idea of the same day airing, so you said it's going to kick off with Wrestle Kingdom, and then how often will we be able to see these same day events?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think it will be same day for anything other than Wrestle Kingdom, but it will be a much quicker turnaround than has been in the past. So, for example, the Wrestle Kingdom events will take and then get to New Beginning at the end of January. That will probably air like the next week, or begin airing the next week. You understand? So,
yeah, absolutely.
It would be within, say, 5 days.
Right. Okay, great.
It had to do with the calendar. It had to do with where Wrestle Kingdom fell on the calendar that New Japan was able to turn it around.
Nice.
And go, into this venture of like, well, of course we can turn it around in 12 hours and get it on the air or whatever it is. It's kind of crazy if you think about it from their perspective. But because they're going to take the show and they're going to put it all together and add commercial breaks in and do all of these different things in a pretty rapid fashion when you look at, the way television normally works. Like, just for example, Chris getting this show together takes what feels like a year.
Right.
And these guys are going to take in a satellite feed, turn it around for broadcast television in the span of 12 hours. So it's
right. And we don't even have to deal with the difference of from Japan to the United States and shows airing in different time zones. This is just Chris trying to get 3 people together in front of a camera to record a show.
Right.
Well, I think the distance between Japan and the United States and Arkansas in the civilized world are vast.
It's about the same.
It's not quite the end. As Coach Lou Holt said when he was the coach of the University of Arkansas, he said it's not the end of the world, but you can see it from here. And rapidly was gone down the road, no longer the coach of the Razorbills.
I don't think we've ever actually told. I think the fans of this show are very aware that I live in New York City. I talk about it a lot. I think maybe we just revealed actually where Chris lives. So,
no, we didn't.
Hey, at least now people who watch the show know there's like working internet and electricity in Arkansas. So that's
true.
That's a plus. What you can't see is that he's not wearing shoes while he's doing the show.
We're hopeful for running water in 2020. Fingers crossed.
2020. Kevin, we may not get a chance to talk to you before Wrestle Kingdom, so the card's starting to actually shape up a little bit. What are you really looking forward to on the card this year? And is there anything that we don't know yet that you can kind of fill us in on what, of course, is New Japan's biggest event? It's the WrestleMania of the year for New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Well, there's a few things that haven't been announced yet, and I think it will just depend on what happens. Like, for example, on December the 9th, Kota Ibushi is going after the never open weight title.
Right.
And depending on whether he wins or loses, I think that will determine what his next match is. I think if he wins, he'll probably wrestle Will Ospreay. But if he loses, I'm not quite sure what direction they would go, whether there would be a rematch, whether there would be a multi-man match, whether it would be a tag, whether it would be something. So it's something to keep an eye on. Plus, Juice Robinson and Cody Rhodes could have, it could be Wrestle Kingdom. It depends if if Juice and Finlay advance to the finals of World Tag League, because that would be at Wrestle Kingdom, right, where they would, if they win World Tag League, they wrestle the tag champs, and that could happen. Same with Zack Sabre Jr. and Tomohiro Ishii. They might have a singles match between each other, but that could get pushed down the road. There's scenarios where as many as 3 different matches could be added to the card, but it might be than that, and they might be that sometimes does happen. They will dangle a carrot out there for you, and then it winds up happening late January, early February, something like that. But so it's going to be it'll be exciting. Kenny Omega, of course, defending the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, and a lot of speculation about Kenny and his future, and Tanahashi and his immediate future, with this really being like Tanahashi's last run. And if he doesn't win, I don't foresee him getting another shot anytime soon. So there's a lot of fans that are certainly hopeful. This is kind of the big marquee match as far as Japan is concerned. This is the one that the Japanese fans are the most excited about because of Tanahashi. They really, really want to see him win. And Tetsuya Naito versus Chris Jericho. So Jericho back at the Dome for a second consecutive year. And it's going to be a very, very physical match. I'm sure we have seen enough of Jericho in New Japan to understand that he takes no prisoners with his style, and it's going to be a hell of a fight. Interesting to see what happens there. And Switchblade Jay White and Okada, a very personal matchup, different for Okada than in all the years it feels like we've known him, because he's always been in the title hunt, but not this year. So there's a lot of good marquee matches, and tickets are on sale ahead of last year's pace. So fans are, and last year's pace had been higher than the year before and higher than the year before. They've been growing each and every year. So New Japan is on target for their goal of selling out the Tokyo Dome in 2020.
Very nice.
Wow. That would be incredibly impressive. Talking about guys like a Kenny Omega, and his future, to sort of shift gears a little bit, I think since we spoke to you last, there are these, and I know a lot of this is still all in sort of the rumor phase, but we have to talk about it anyway, of course, because we have to talk about it. Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, potentially branching off, doing their own thing with what could be called the All Elite Wrestling promotion. There have been rumors of the Jacksonville Jaguars owner coming in as sort of a backer. In fact, Cody Rhodes and Brandy were spotted in the Jacksonville Jaguars VIP box at the game this past weekend. So that kind of further fueled that speculation. What are your sort of initial thoughts? And there were rumors that Chris Jericho and Jim Ross were going to be attached to that, but they sort of came out on Twitter and shot those rumors down. you never know if that necessarily means they won't be affiliated with it. Maybe just not trying to make that known at this time. I don't know if you heard anything about that. If you did, what was your sort of initial reaction to that?
Well, something has been brewing for a while, and obviously where there's smoke, there's fire. We just don't know exactly what it's going to be. I thought, for example, that when the Khan family was sort of linked to it, that they were actually going to rename. They were going to go more towards the football side and call it the Nick and Matt Jacksonville Jaguars, which probably would have sold a lot more merch. But as it is, I think that we do just kind of have to wait and see. But they have done, Cody and the Bucks and all those guys, they've just done a masterful job of having us sort of hanging on every tweet and every word and every frame, and being in the Elite episode, we're all looking for clues and we're all wanting to see what's going to happen. And we all want to put our prognosticator hat on and pick where they're going to be and decide where we're going to go. But I don't think anybody knows except for those guys. So when the time is right, they will certainly let us know, I'm sure, in grand style.
Kevin, I'm curious. I mean, I feel like sometimes, the internet can kind of sensationalize things. They can kind of overinflate certain things. Yeah, absolutely. If people didn't know any better, they would, they could come across VLW and see the incredible production value and stuff and think that I'm working with $1 million worth of equipment over here. And of course I'm not. And so, it really does get to the point where it's hard to understand just how big something may seem to be. And, look, I'll be the first to give credit where it's due when it comes to Cody and the Young Bucks and what they put on with their All-In event. It took a life of its own. It was organic. It just happened, and it was impressive. That being said, Kevin, you've been involved in every aspect, in a lot of ways with a variety of different companies. Of course, WWE, kind of the big mammoth of them all, and then of course you've worked with a number of smaller companies as well, and now your work with New Japan. You've also been around a lot of these guys, the Young Bucks, Cody, Rhodes. Is what's going on right now, do you feel like it is so legitimate at this point and it's credible enough that starting an entire company, if that's the direction they are in fact going in, is a wise choice after one successful event? Or, it just seems a little bit risky, and I could have sworn that I thought, some of the promos that I heard after All In and everything like that seemed like they were going to kind of crawl and walk a little bit before they ran, and now here we are. There's not even been a second event, and we're talking about a massive backer, a major promotion potentially. What are your reservations, if there are any? Do you and I guess more to the point, do you think that this is real? What we're getting as far as Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks and this immense just aura about like this huge whatever it is that's kind of going on. Is it a real thing, or do you think this might be some sort of kind of bubble that everybody's living in right now, and it's a little unwise maybe to believe in it just quite as much as it seems like they might be with this huge promotion and this huge idea?
Yeah, I think it's worth belief in because of the success of All In and the fact that it's these core guys and they're going to do something. What that something is, we don't know exactly
yet. That's true.
Yet. Right. It is a little hard for us to say it's going to be this and it's going to, and therefore it will either meet or exceed our expectations or fall short. It's difficult for us to say that at that point because we don't know what the it is. Are they shooting for network television?
Right.
Well, are they going to be on CBS or NBC opposite SmackDown? I don't think so. But if they have a financier to take some of the weight off of their shoulders to help them produce events on a small, medium, large scale, whatever, okay, cool. There's been financiers and investors in wrestling for as long as there's been wrestling.
Sure.
So
sure.
I don't think there's anything new with that. And if you look at it in terms of any other sport, whether it's, prize fighting, UFC, boxing, et cetera, there's always a great hype machine behind a big fight. big events. And Cody has shown to me to be the master of that, creating the hype and creating the demand. So it to me, it's just, I'm enjoying the ride. I'm along with as far as those guys will take us. I think it's going to be fun. But we are all prisoners of the moment right now. We demand answers now, damn it. Please, we must know now.
I want to know.
Do. When we had Eric Bischoff on the show a few weeks ago, one of the things he pointed out was how impressive it was, when All In was announced. We talked about sort of the day it was announced. Him and I was thinking similarly. I think a lot of people were thinking, well, if this thing doesn't air, if they've got no television here to push any of the storylines, how the hell is this thing going to sell? And they really did the whole thing via social media. They were doing promos and posting hype all over social media and using the Being Elite YouTube show to kind of push these matches and push the card. And then, of course, it ended up selling out and selling decently well in terms of the numbers of people buying it via the various streaming platforms it was on. If this ends up being a promotion, if this is an all elite wrestling promotion, does it need television in 2018?
No, I don't think so.
No, not at all. No, it doesn't need it doesn't need television at all. Television many times is the anchor around, any great wrestling producer's neck, because you have to fill the time, you have to fill the content. Television doesn't sell tickets anymore. It doesn't. It used to. It doesn't. And that's not just here. That's anywhere in the world. The Rev Pro's got a TV show that's been airing for the past 7 weeks on Free Sports, and it hasn't sold one ticket, and it's not going to. It's a different animal now, and television is about entertainment. It's about content. It's about filling time. So if you can do it one way, the most cost-effective way is through, say, a YouTube channel or some sort of streaming method. Fight TV example, perfect one. That might be the best way to go. Yeah. And if I was advising someone on a startup, I would have them look away from television and focus on your promotion, focus on your back end, on your office and your staffing in that regard. Talent will take care of itself. Yeah. But if we can run things efficiently and smoothly and keep costs down, then we can do it for a long time, and we can find ways to get success.
To what extent then does it, if it's a promotion, does it necessitate a giant live audience? Because even what we're seeing with WWE, their business model is shifting. Where they were a live event based company before, selling tickets to house shows, that's not true anymore. And they're not even as worried anymore about, you see a SmackDown live event that sells 1,500 tickets, not worried about that because they have all these other revenue streams. So how important is then the live audience at these shows going to become for a promotion like an All Elite Wrestling?
We're looking for one of the, we had a lot of ideas that never came to fruition in ROH because they just weren't interested in listening to them. But that doesn't mean they weren't good ideas. And one of the ideas was actually Matt Sydal and I that talked about it. And his idea was, and I loved it and ran with it and threw it against the wall and nothing stuck, is to take images from your live events and sell on the idea of the hype and the excitement. And that's what you put forth on your television. Away very little content, so to speak, on your television. And if you really want to see it, you got to see it live. If that's what we're doing, if we're stressing the live event and we want more people at our live events, then that's how we structure a television show. If you are Cody and these guys and you're looking to, it depends on what their philosophy is. Like, what's the core belief in this? Is it to run 4 quarterly events a year in various cities around the country? Then you don't need television. Are we wanting to build a brand and have episodics and create our own territory system like WWE might be trying to recreate? Well, then, you do need some sort of territory. You do need some sort of television in order to grow everything. So it just depends on kind of what the end goal is. But I think what WWE is doing now is they're trying to take us back to 1984 when they first came on the scene nationally and were quote unquote partnering with and working with all of these various groups to simply crush them, take all their stars, and put them out of business.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because just recently, within the past week, reports have surfaced indicating that all of a sudden these NXT UK guys, all of their deals are being restructured, where now they can't take these indie events anymore. Now WWE still has ties with promotions like Insane Championship Wrestling and WXW in Germany and Progress. And so the guys will be allowed to work those events. But whereas they were free to work independent events outside of those companies and outside of WWE, they can't do that anymore. So is this just sort of further proof that WWE wants to just sort of create its own territory system as opposed to working with these companies?
They want to bludgeon any competition. Most importantly, they want to bludgeon New Japan and Ring of Honor.
Okay.
That's what I think. How do you not want to go after what's perceived to be your biggest competition? And your biggest competition is running Madison Square Garden. And if you think that they've forgotten that fact, that's the end goal. The end goal is to crush them and to run them out of business.
And no, they didn't forget about that because they've moved. They've I don't know if you noticed this, but they switched the Hall of Fame and NXT TakeOver. So the Hall of Fame is now running opposite ROH at MSG as opposed to the TakeOver event. So what do you make of that?
I think for the time being, it's waving the white flag. I'm not quite sure what the end goal is.
Yeah.
If for WWE, if it was me and I'm Vince, I'm doing anything I can to get eyes off of that product, eyes off of that show, and to sign away anybody that I can. And I don't care whether they speak English or not. I don't care whether they're marketable stars for WWE in 2018, 2019 or not. I'm looking to do something to hurt somebody because that's the way Vince operates. I don't know if you guys realize this, but he's kind of petty and vindictive, and he hasn't ever changed. So he's looking to hurt somebody, and his goal and his mission, through Triple H, same mission, is to own the wrestling world and develop territories all around the world and put every independent promotion out of business and have everybody come from WWE.
I agree with you, and I think it's going to be interesting. And WrestleMania weekend too. I know you and I are both, of course, you're going to be down there, but I'm hoping to be up there as well and kind of witness some of this stuff, and I'm looking forward to it. And right now, Nick, I mean, I know you're probably in the same boat in some ways, at least. If I have the choice to kind of check out what Ring of Honor and New Japan and everything has going on WrestleMania weekend, maybe with the exception of WrestleMania, but for the most part, I'm probably getting out and checking out some of these other things as well. Although, I mean, I will give them a little bit of credit that NXT, a lot more comparable to what, the Ring of Honor, the Madison Square Garden show is going to be versus what you see on WWE. I think that it makes a lot of sense kind of pulling from the same crop of people, most likely, that they change nights for that. The Hall of Fame isn't near as big of a deal as NXT is, as far as it having a successful show. And I would imagine that the crowd that really enjoys NXT stuff, you're kind of pulling from the same crowd,
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, and that's why it's so interesting to me that, I guess now you can, if you are those fans, you can get those 3 days. You can get your wrestling fix Friday, Saturday, and Sunday,
right,
as opposed to having to choose between the two events. But I mean, yeah, to me, and it was funny because Triple H said, I mean, he said it last year, I think, or maybe it was actually earlier this year. He said in an interview, publicly, that we are not trying to be the big bad wolf and stomp everything out here. We're trying to give other talents more opportunities. But I think it's becoming so clear to everyone else, that this is just sign up as much possible talent as you can so that you keep them away from any other promotion. And they started that in the UK because of that ITV project that, sort of I don't know where that's really at right now or the future of that, but they've certainly secured a lot of talent that can't be working that show. So,
right.
What do you make of a Triple H comment that they're not trying to be the big bad wolf?
I think business changes. I think we can take Paul at his face, right? Face value. And 1 year ago, if he said that, he may have believed it. But that may not be the reality. It may not have been his end goal. But that's the way he's had to perhaps shape his message now going forward. Mm-hmm. That maybe the decision came from above him. That maybe it wasn't. Maybe he had a change of mind. I'm not saying he went into this, fully intending on lying to everybody and eventually becoming the big bad wolf that he said they were not. But that's what they are. That's totally what they are. But Vince said the same thing in '84. He wanted to work with everybody, put everybody on that All-American Wrestling on USA and show highlights of the territories and blah, 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 blah. And he crushed all of them. He took all of their TV. He took all their stars. He took everything and put them all out of business. Would they have gone out of business anyway? For the most part, yes, because of cable. It was changing the way the territories had done business, and that story's been told ad nauseum. But here we are 36 years later, and the same thing is happening again, now just with a new medium. And you think about the changes for Evolve. Look at the way Evolve's had to change. Their top guys have gotten signed. It was sold to wrestlers to sign with Evolve as opposed to ROH so that you can be in the feeder system for WWE. And look at all the guys they've signed that have been from Evolve, from Matt Riddle and Keith Lee, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So whether it's ROH and them taking all their top stars, whether it's Evolve and them taking all their top stars, or signing away and locking down to exclusives wrestlers that would otherwise be part-time in Europe, then so be it.
Yeah. Been listening to Kevin Kelly, Plan B, here on The Voice of Wrestling. Kevin, one of the things, I know we rib each other all the time, but I do want to say I've known you for a very, very, very long time, and you've kind of had your ups and downs. At least when you first left WWE, I remember you seemed angry at the world. Of course, it made for great radio, so I loved it. But as far as New Japan, you've given a lot of reasons, Nick, you as well, of why people need to go out and catch New Japan as often as they can. Mm-hmm. But Kevin, I mean, it just from a personal standpoint from me to you, it really seems kind of another reason maybe why people should go out. You seem to be really having fun again in the wrestling business, and I would imagine that the product is in part because that's partly because of the product and everything as well, and maybe the future plans and you being a real big part of that. But it really does, just from kind of my perspective, it really seems like you're having a lot of fun again, and I would imagine New Japan is at least is the one of the prime. I'm not going to say family and things like that. I'm not going to get into that. But I mean, as far as pro wrestling and your career go, New Japan is obviously the reason for that.
I've never been happier as an announcer. Because there were things I was happy about with ROH, but then there were things that I would constantly see and want to improve, and we could never improve them.
Right.
So you run into that brick wall so many times, and it starts to hurt. This is what it was like for me. This was probably what it was like to work for, the Crockett's in 85, 86.
Wow.
It's that hot of a brand right now where not every new market that the Crockett's went into, by the way, during that time, immediately turned sellout business.
Sure.
It took time to grow because they went from just being a regional promotion to expanding across the country, and not every market worked. LA started hot, and then LA receded. It took Texas a little while to go. Eventually it got there a little bit, but then economic factors hit, but this to me is what it was like then. Because everything that the kind of the booking touches right now works. And it's so easy to sit out there and tell these incredible stories and narrate these wonderful matches because that there's sense behind it. I make the comment all the time. Imagine what Arn Anderson would have been like in his career if he would have had a steady booking hand guiding him.
Right.
As opposed to it being all up and down, getting pissed off at Dusty, leaving with Tully, going to WWF, Tully failing the drug test, wanting to leave, coming back for less money as a single, Arn up, down, up, down, up, down, turn, 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 turn. How great would he have been if he would have just been slow and steady wins the race, Arn Anderson, all the way up?
Right.
He would have been just on this remarkable ride, as opposed to people hating the promotion but loving him getting over in spite of whom, for whom he worked.
Sure.
That's why guys like Ishii and Goto and, kind of guys that are household names, solid mid-card, upper mid-card, occasionally get that glimpse at the top. That's why they're always so consistently over, because it's steady and you know what you're going to get. And wrestling, like I've said this before, I come on first appearance on, Plan B way back when. Wrestling is comfort food, man. It doesn't need to be rocket science. It doesn't need the more easily digestible that wrestling is. People like it.
True.
And it just works. So don't overcomplicate it. Don't change, bookers midstream, because now you're changing the producer of the play. You're changing, the director of the movie in the middle of shooting.
Yep. Right.
Oh, it's never going to work. It's a different guy's vision. So, that's the reason why New Japan is so successful. And because of it being standalone in regards to, my God, there isn't anybody else doing business like New Japan. There isn't anybody else pushing wrestling on a grand scale like New Japan. Well, That's why people like it, because it's not WWE.
True.
And WWE is doing their thing. And, that to me, and we talked about this 1,000 times, guys, but, all the failures and bumps in the road for TNA and Impact throughout the years was them trying to sort of be WWE light, WWE-esque, and it worked. The reason why New Japan is successful is because it has nothing to do with WWE and doesn't pattern their business at all. They do their thing. They've been doing their thing, and it just works.
It's very, very difficult to disagree with that. It's very much working, because it is becoming more mainstream as far as conversation, wrestling fans getting into it, and WWE, nothing to take away from them. They're doing everything right, at least as far. I mean, when you look at the money and the finances of it all, clearly they're doing things right. But a lot of fans,
they might headline WrestleMania with a women's match this year.
That's incredible. No, it's
Think
true.
about that they've gotten these women over to the point, and it doesn't matter gender. I'm not talking about gender, but they've taken this, they've decided, we're going to get these stars over to the point that they can headline WrestleMania. Holy crap, they're doing it. And I don't think anybody would blink an eye if you've got Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey as your headline for Mania this year.
Without a doubt.
Not at this point, especially. No, they're doing a lot of things. They're doing a lot of good things. Guys, Kevin Kelly. Kevin, as always, it's a real pleasure at times. But no, I'm just
Nick. I do just want to thank you. I want to wish you the happiest of holiday seasons. And I look forward to seeing you in April at some related event to our journey there to MSG in that huge weekend. And I want to thank you, Nick, for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Kevin, thank you so much as always. And if there's anything again that you want me to pass on to Chris, just keep it to yourself, really. Honestly.
To be honest, I would like one thing. I would like Chris to pass on. So
really? It started with the insults about where I'm from and stuff and running water, and now he wants me to die. Like, it's gone very morbid on VOW.
It's a progression of a storyline. What are we talking about here?
Well, right. Very, very.
When Nick went there, I'm taking up the other half of the story. Would you like Chris to pass on? He said. And I said, yes, I would like Chris to pass on.
That's not what he said. We're going to come back here on The Voice of Wrestling. For Kevin Kelly, that's Nick Paglino. I'm Chris Cash. We're coming back to wrap it up. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Voice of Wrestling. Chris Cash, Nick Paglino. And thank you, Kevin. As always, it is a real pleasure, real pleasure having you on the show. I don't think people realize how much it means to me.
They need to have you as one of those people in the audience that's asking Bayley and Sasha Banks the questions, because you're really good at pulling off bullshit. I mean, I almost believed that for like 1 second, I almost even got a little teary-eyed there thinking that you and Kevin were like actually friends,
right.
Based on that monologue that you just delivered there. I don't know what Hallmark movie you stole that from.
Well, look.
But they need to have you as one of these audience members that asks these questions, because you're a lot more convincing than what was the one this week? It was like, if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Right.
If I could have a superpower, it would be that I could create, with the wave of my hand, a better actor to deliver this stupid question.
No, a better segment. But as far as Kevin, we have a love-hate relationship. We both love to hate each other, and it's all good, and we go from there. But I can tell Kevin is happier than he's ever been, and it's nice to see him find a real position, a real 100%. Home there with New Japan, and I
doing some amazing work over there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know, but maybe I'll get around to watching it one of these days. That being said, we are ready to bring back another good segment that we've had for years here on the show. It's the hot topics of the week, and Nick, I know you've got some stuff to kind of run down, and we'll give our quick thoughts before we wrap up and get out of here.
Yeah, earlier on the show, we were talking a little bit about Alexa Bliss, so I kind of wanted to run down a bit of a talent update right now. Mark Henry, who is a regular on Busted Open Radio, actually announced this week that Alexa Bliss has been cleared to return to the ring. So she's been dealing with a concussion, really, which has kept her out for the better part of over a month. And apparently she is ready to transition back into the ring. So kudos to her for being able to get back in there. I know we've missed her. Another bit of really good news that I think will make fans really happy, according to Mike Johnson of PW Insider, Roman Reigns will actually be making an appearance at this year's Tribute to the Troops special. So that show's actually being taped this week, and then it's going to be airing on December 20th. And that will be Roman Reigns' it'll be his first WWE appearance since leaving, the WWE on Raw and announcing his battle with leukemia. And to my knowledge, it'll be his second public appearance. He did make an appearance at the Georgia Tech versus Georgia college football game a couple weeks ago. He looked like he was in great spirits then. So it is really great to see that we'll be hearing from him and seeing his face on WWE TV pretty soon. And finally, for those of you who might have been wondering, I thought the opening segment and the closing segment of Raw this week was fantastic. The women are just absolutely tearing it up. It is so great to see the women being in the spotlight on Raw and SmackDown. They are the stars right now. As far as I'm concerned, Ronda Rousey, Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, they are the Asuka. They are just absolutely the shining stars of WWE right now. But Natalya was actually removed from the match at the beginning of Raw, and according to reports, that is because she is dealing with a real-life injury right now. She's dealing with an elbow injury. So they had to pull her from the match, and that's why Ember Moon ended up competing in the main event on Raw. But Chris, also having to do with Natalya, and I'd like to get your quick thoughts on this. It was also reported that Natalya was actually originally the one who's supposed to face Ronda Rousey for the title at TLC. She was supposed to turn on Ronda Rousey after winning the Women's Battle Royal match at Evolution. But after Jim Neidhart died, WWE decided against turning Natalya heel because they just thought it wouldn't be appropriate in the light of Anvil's death. And they really didn't think the fans would boo her, because they loved supporting her after the death. What do you make of that original sort of report there of those creative plans?
I'm not surprised. I think you and I we talked about it on previous shows of VOW, and both of us kind of thought that there was a very good possibility Natalya was going to turn heel pretty quickly and be one of the main programs, at least. Again, ultimately filler for Ronda, as we've kind of known, even though that appears to potentially be changing. We're not sure yet. As far as Charlotte Flair being kind of the WrestleMania match for Ronda Rousey, and now Becky Lynch has thrown a kink into those plans a little bit. We'll see what happens. But Natalya was supposed to be probably a pretty personal feud and a safe feud that I think Ronda Rousey was planned on being kind of paired up with and just someone she would be comfortable with, and I think it would have been helpful early on. Nick, you mentioned something last week or the week prior, I think, though, that I completely agree with when it comes to Ronda Rousey now. She doesn't need a safety net anymore. She is thriving in her position. She's getting better on the mic, getting better with the backstage promos, and in the ring, she can go with anybody. She's truly a Brock Lesnar female version of such. I mean, I remember he was just kind of a brute force, even back before he went off to try football and then ultimately, UFC and everything that took place. I feel like Brock was just a well-rounded athlete, and you can tell that's what she is. And she's just really found a good home there. And so Natalya, as far as that goes, I kind of expected it. I'm not surprised, obviously, after the death of her father, that they would put hold on those plans if they decide to kind of go back to that plan at some point. We'll see where it goes. But look, Natalya, honestly, and I'm happy for her because Natalya's just been such a staple there in the women's division for so long now. She deserves some stuff, and I think that the death of her father kind of rejuvenated her a little bit even. And I think the heel turn could have done it, although we've seen her as a heel, so I'm not sure that would have done the trick. But I think they did, I'm not going to say she lucked out because that would be in poor taste, but I really do think that it did help her ultimately, and it's great for her. She's used it. Yeah, she's used it, and WWE also kind of allowed, I think, for it to breathe and not make that sudden decision after his death to then decide, let's keep going with the plans that we had, because she is more over now. Obviously, the sympathy has gone into her favor, but she ultimately has then taken that and taken a step in the right direction. And I'm sure her father would be most proud of her at this point, that she's actually elevated her game. And I would love to see a little bit more out of Natalya. The problem, though, is with Ronda Rousey as your champion, and you're not really wanting to turn Natalya heel at this point. You kind of have to put her in a different place. And that's where I think Alexa Bliss, as you mentioned, Nick, now being cleared to ring, could maybe come into play. I would love to see them starting to look at the women beyond just the titles. Becky Lynch on one side, Ronda on the other, and then the people that kind of circulate around their orbit. I'd rather say, look, you've got your main event feuds going on with Ronda Rousey and Nia Jax at this point. Why not allow Alexa and Natalya to actually have some personal taste to their feud, something kind of on that line, and whether it's Alexa or someone like her, I feel like they need to start utilizing some of the pushes they could get and some of the circumstantial boost in momentum that some of these other women and men across the board, but they really need to find a way to add some meaning and relevance to the undercard, and that includes the women's division and someone obviously like Natalya.
Agreed. I've always bought Natalya more as a babyface than a heel. I think Natalya is just sort of a born babyface. She's a natural babyface. So I like the role that she's in right now. I prefer her like this. And here's to hoping that she does get that title shot at some point down the line, because she certainly deserves it. Moving on, JBL. JBL got wasted during, what was it, the Cowboys game last week when they beat the Saints?
Which, by the way, go Cowboys! My Cowboys dominated.
Okay, and
don't K that.
Gets drunk, and he tells Cody Rhodes he's gonna kill him and that he's an idiot, and this just made me laugh because I couldn't wait to hear what JBL's politically correct response was going to be. He's so good at coming back and saying, Dusty Rhodes, he was a good friend, and the family is good friends, and I'm good friends with Cody Rhodes, and I'm gonna block everybody on Twitter who didn't like what I was gonna say. This guy is such a jackass. This guy is such a bully, and it was just so clear. He just made it so clear to everybody that here's a dude who drinks a bunch of beer and then goes and it's bad enough that he bullies people in real life. He's bullying people online. Then he has to come out with his Fox News, CNBC analytical explanation for why I did what I did. Yeah, well, I'm not buying any of it. it just the whole situation was entertaining because it's been a while since we've had a good JBL meltdown story, and we finally got it. If people aren't picking up what I'm throwing down right now, I don't care much for the guy.
I think, this is the classic case of kind of kicking people when they're on top. You don't want to see people succeed when it's not you and things like that. And I didn't know JBL was that guy. I mean, he seems to be okay with not being in the spotlight now. I mean, his time has passed. I mean, you get a guy like Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks doing what they're doing and doing it on their own. I mean, making something out of a bad scenario. When Cody gets, when Cody leaves WWE, there's a lot of things that could go wrong if when you try to branch out too far on your own. Give the guy some credit. I'm still skeptical of some massive, WWE competitor in this All Elite Wrestling or anything along those lines. I think that there is a lot of room though for a good promotion with the right backers and the right minds behind it to be successful this day and age, with all the technology we've got at our disposal and they have at their disposal and everything. But JBL, get a life and then don't try to cover it up. I mean, obviously alcohol is the one of the world's best truth serums, and don't then try to backtrack and and then kind of just say that, hey, I was just messing around, like I love his father and blah blah. Like,
I'll tell you what we can both, I have now become a Cowboys. I'm now a Dallas Cowboys fan because I hope they continue winning, because the Schadenfreude in me wants to see this happen again. I want the Cowboy. Well, they got what? They got the Eagles. There you go. Big division rival this Sunday. Eagles Cowboys. And I'm an Eagles fan.
True.
But I'm rooting for the Cowboys because I'm rooting for JBL's Twitter account to light up at 11:30 p.m. And let's see who the wrestling god will take aim at this Sunday night. It'll probably be Hornswoggle, or Jinder Mahal, because he deserves it. Anyway, all right. I see you. This is on video. I see you. Our last topic here, usually we like to open the show with an opening thought and close the show with a closing thought. I thought both of us could throw this out here. For those of you fans who are unaware, the angle on Monday night, which took place, which saw Rhino lose a match to Heath Slater, and he was fired from Raw. What you didn't see on Raw was during a commercial break, Rhino actually announced his retirement from pro wrestling on Raw in front of the live audience. So he has officially retired from pro wrestling. That's why they did the firing angle on Raw. I always loved Rhino. I thought the guy was great. I loved him in ECW. I loved his first run in WWE. He had such a surprising, great chemistry with Heath Slater when they became the first SmackDown tag team champions. So congratulations to Rhino on a really phenomenal career. He's a Michigan boy, so I love him for that. And good luck in his future. It's he'll be missed. I think he was definitely one of the greats. Definitely one of the greats in ECW, and I think really in total in pro wrestling history, sort of one of those underrated greats that kind of slipped under the radar.
Well, everywhere he went, he was successful, at least partly. I mean, he was successful in ECW. Was successful in WWE, and even Impact didn't really screw up with him. They put him as their front guy for at least a little while, even though they dropped the ball at the end of it. They did see obviously what you and I see and saw in him as being very capable of being a main event guy, because he was over in Impact like $1 million, and it's hard to get over in Impact to begin with, but not so much back then. I mean, it was a little easier back then. That being said, he definitely is one of my favorites as well. Love to have seen like he come back and kind of get that last little bit of fun and run with WWE. It was nice of them to kind of give him that spot. And he's always he kind of reminds me a little bit of Taz in a sense of just a badass all the time. He just comes off like a beast. His style is beastly. If that, whatever, if you understand where I'm going. And I think, look, I respect Rhino as much as I could probably say that I respect just about anybody in the business. I think that he really is just kind of a good guy under the radar as far as drama and a lot of bullshit from what I hear. and just a super, super nice guy and well-deserved. So good luck. Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't be surprised if he finds work, behind the scenes somewhere. That would be a really good kind of transition for him.
Sure,
and
sure.
WWE would be idiots if they haven't already asked him to do something behind the scenes if that's what he's interested in.
Well, that's going to do it, guys. Next week, we got a huge show, Chris. We're going to be joined by Al Snow.
That's right.
Former WWE Impact Wrestling star. Al Snow, he's going to be coming on to discuss with us the big OVW Christmas Chaos event. That's going to be airing on Fight TV. Also going to be talking a lot about his involvement with OVW since purchasing the promotion. And we will have him on next week.
Guys, that's Nick Paglino. I'm Chris Cash. And for Kevin Kelly, this is the Voice of Wrestling. We'll see you next week.